My name is Blaine, and I am 33 years old. For 11 years, I have been a ghost to my family. Now, I stand at the back of this elegant ballroom, watching my younger sister Audrey float down the aisle in a designer wedding gown. No one notices me. How could they? The bright, eager girl they once knew disappeared years ago, replaced by the woman I am today. They have no idea that in exactly 7 minutes, I will shatter the perfect illusion they have lived in for over a decade. Before I take you back to where this all began, let me know where you are watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you will want to hear how a bride's perfect day became the moment when years of lies finally unraveled. Growing up, I was the eldest daughter in what everyone considered the perfect American family. We lived in a beautiful 2-story colonial house in Connecticut, with a manicured lawn and a white picket fence that made our home look like something out of a magazine. My father, Thomas, was a successful corporate attorney, while my mother, Eleanor, worked as the head of public relations for a major pharmaceutical company. From the outside, we had everything. My sister Audrey was born just 2 years after me. As children, people often mistook us for twins despite the age difference. We had the same chestnut hair, hazel eyes, and heart-shaped faces. The similarities ended there. From an early age, Audrey exhibited a competitive streak that went beyond normal sibling rivalry. When I learned to ride a bike at 6, she demanded training wheels be removed from hers at 4. When I won a spelling bee in 5th grade, she cried for 3 days straight. Our parents called it determination. Looking back, I recognize it was something darker, something I was too young to name. Our parents placed enormous emphasis on achievement and appearances. Every accomplishment was celebrated with elaborate dinner parties where we were expected to perform our talents for their friends. Every failure, however minor, was dissected in painful detail. My mother would say, "Warrens do not lose. Warrens excel." This pressure affected Audrey differently than it affected me. While I developed thick skin, finding genuine joy in my achievements, Audrey seemed to measure her worth entirely by how she compared to others, especially to me. Music became my sanctuary early on. I discovered my gift for piano when I was 7, when my grandmother Evelyn first placed my small fingers on the keys of her antique Steinway. Within months, I was playing pieces that children years older struggled with. By 16, I was performing concertos with the State Youth Orchestra. My talent was undeniable, and it became the one area where I truly shined brighter than anyone else in the family. Academics came naturally to me as well. I maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout high school, served as senior class president, and led the debate team to nationals 3 years in a row. My parents proudly displayed my trophies and certificates in our living room, often guiding guests to admire them during their frequent dinner parties. The summer before my senior year, something miraculous happened. A talent scout from Juilliard attended one of my recitals and approached me afterward. She said she had rarely heard such emotional depth from someone so young and encouraged me to apply for their prestigious program. 3 months later, I received a letter offering me a full scholarship. I remember holding that cream-colored envelope in my trembling hands, tears streaming down my face. All my hard work had paid off. New York City and a future in music awaited me. My grandmother Evelyn was the first person I told. She had always been my biggest supporter, attending every recital when my parents were too busy with work commitments. When I showed her the scholarship letter, she pulled me into a tight hug and whispered, "I always knew you were destined for greatness, my darling." She gave me her precious pearl necklace that day, a family heirloom that had belonged to her mother. "For your first performance at Carnegie Hall," she said with absolute conviction that I would get there. James Peterson had been my boyfriend since sophomore year. He was the quarterback with unexpected depth, writing poetry and dreaming of becoming a literature professor. While other high school couples broke up over trivial matters, we supported each other through every challenge. When I received my Juilliard acceptance, James was thrilled for me despite knowing we would soon be facing a long-distance relationship. "Your talent deserves to be shared with the world," he told me, holding both my hands in his. "We will make it work." That summer should have been the happiest time of my life. I spent my days practicing piano, researching apartments in New York, and making plans for my future. James and I had picnics by the lake, went a drive and movies, and created a bucket list of things to do before I left for college. My parents even seemed proud, though they were careful not to show too much emotion. "This is what we expected of you," my father said when I showed him the scholarship letter, as if it were simply the fulfillment of a business contract rather than the realization of my dreams. Audrey's behavior began to change subtly as my departure date grew closer. I would catch her watching me practice piano with an unreadable expression. She started asking detailed questions about Juilliard and New York City. At first, I was touched by what I interpreted as genuine interest. I shared everything with her, from the courses I planned to take to the tiny student apartment I hoped to find. I even showed her the special email address I had created for my correspondence with the university, thinking she wanted to feel included in this new chapter of my life. One evening, about a month before I was scheduled to leave, I noticed Audrey wearing my favorite blue sweater, the one James had given me for our anniversary. When I asked her about it, she smiled in a way that made me uncomfortable. "I just wanted to see how it felt to be you," she said. "Everyone loves Blaine the prodigy." She twirled in front of my mirror, striking poses that mimicked my mannerisms. "Blaine, who gets everything she wants." Something in her voice sent a chill down my spine, but I dismissed it as typical sister jealousy. After all, she would soon have our parents' undivided attention once I left for school. I had no idea that what I was witnessing were the first signs of a devastating betrayal that would cost me everything I had worked for. The perfect family facade was about to crack, revealing something ugly and broken underneath. And I, the golden child, was about to fall from grace in a way I never could have imagined. The first concrete sign that something was seriously wrong came 3 weeks before my scheduled departure for Juilliard. I kept a journal where I wrote my deepest thoughts, fears, and dreams about my future in New York. One morning, I discovered it missing from my desk drawer. I tore my room apart searching for it, panic rising in my chest as I imagined someone reading my private thoughts. When I finally found it tucked between Audrey's mattress and box spring while borrowing a sweater from her closet, the violation hit me like a physical blow. Several pages had been photographed with her phone, which I discovered when I checked her recently deleted photos while she was in the shower. Confronting her led nowhere. "You are being paranoid," she said with a perfectly innocent expression. "Why would I care about your silly diary?" Our parents sided with her when I brought it up at dinner, my mother suggesting I was experiencing pre-college anxiety and imagining things. A week later, I walked into the bathroom to find Audrey wearing my clothes, styling her hair exactly like mine, and practicing my speech patterns in the mirror. She had even applied makeup to accentuate the features that made us look similar. When she noticed me watching, she froze for just a second before laughing it off. "Just playing around," she said breezily. "Do not be so serious all the time." Strange incidents began piling up. My friends mentioned receiving emails from me changing plans for meetups, emails I never sent. My piano teacher called asking why I had canceled my final lessons when I had done no such thing. The most disturbing call came from my high school counselor, asking why I was suddenly deferring my college acceptance when I had expressed such excitement about it just days earlier. The scholarship notification letter disappeared from my desk. When I accused Audrey of taking it, my parents intervened. "Blaine, this jealousy is becoming concerning," my father said sternly. "Your sister is proud of you." These accusations are unfounded. I began keeping my acceptance documents locked in a small safe my grandmother had given me for my 18th birthday. The betrayal escalated dramatically 2 weeks before my planned departure. I returned home early from a date with James to find Audrey in my room, hunched over my laptop. When I demanded to know what she was doing, she quickly closed it and claimed she was just borrowing it to check social media. Suspicious, I checked my email after she left and found nothing obviously amiss. It was only later that I discovered the truth. I went to Audrey's room to borrow a phone charger and noticed a torn piece of paper in her trash can with the Juilliard letterhead. My heart pounding, I pieced together the scraps and realized with horror that it was my original acceptance letter, torn to shreds. In her desk drawer, I found printouts of emails between me and the Juilliard admissions office, declining my placement due to personal and family issues. The emails had been sent from my account. The confrontation that followed was explosive. I burst into the living room, where my family was watching TV, and threw the evidence on the coffee table. "She is trying to sabotage my future," I shouted, pointing at Audrey, who immediately burst into tears. "She accessed my email and declined my Juilliard scholarship. She is trying to steal my life." Instead of the shock and support I expected, my parents looked at me with concern and disappointment. "Blaine, this has gone too far," my father said firmly. "Fabricating evidence against your sister is beyond unacceptable." "Fabricating? Look at the evidence right in front of you," I screamed, my voice breaking with frustration. My mother put her arm around a sobbing Audrey. "Honey, we know you are nervous about leaving home, but this is not the way to handle it. Perhaps we should discuss deferring your enrollment if you are not ready." I could not believe what was happening. It was as if I had stepped into an alternate reality where nothing made sense. "Call Juilliard," I begged. "Call them right now and ask if I sent an email declining my place." "It is nearly midnight," my father pointed out reasonably. "And frankly, if you did send such an email during a moment of panic, that is something we should discuss as a family rather than bothering administrators at this hour." The next day, James called to break up with me. His voice was distant, uncomfortable. "I think we need some space, Blaine. Things have gotten intense, and I cannot be your emotional support right now." When I asked what he meant, he vaguely referenced all the dramatic stuff happening with my family and how Audrey had told him about my episodes. My boyfriend of 3 years ended our relationship based on lies my sister had told him, and there was nothing I could do to convince him otherwise. 3 days later, I received an official email from Juilliard confirming my voluntary withdrawal and wishing me well in my future endeavors. When I called the admissions office in a panic, they politely informed me that they had already given my spot to another student on the waitlist, and that while they sympathized with my change of heart, their decision was final. The final blow came when Audrey announced at dinner that she had been accepted into Princeton University with a partial scholarship. My parents were ecstatic, immediately planning a celebration dinner. When I pointed out the suspicious timing, suggesting she had somehow manipulated the situation to her advantage, my mother gave me a look of such disappointment that it still haunts me. "Blaine," she said quietly, "I am starting to think you need to speak with someone professional about these jealous feelings. Your sister worked hard for this opportunity. Why can you not be happy for her like she was for you?" I looked at Audrey, who smiled at me with triumphant eyes while maintaining a concerned expression for our parents' benefit. In that moment, I knew that something had fundamentally broken in our family. The truth no longer mattered. Perception was reality, and somehow, Audrey had managed to control how everyone perceived both of us. I was no longer the accomplished, reliable daughter. I had been recast as unstable, jealous, and potentially dangerous to my innocent sister's well-being. And the worst part, I had no idea how much further she would go to maintain this new narrative. The weeks following my lost scholarship were a calculated descent into madness, orchestrated with a precision that still chills me when I think about it. What began as strange occurrences escalated into a systematic campaign to discredit me entirely. Money disappeared from my wallet, small amounts at first, just enough to make me question my memory. Then larger sums vanished from the savings account I had built working part-time at a local music store. When I reported the missing funds to the bank, they showed me withdrawal slips with my signature, forged so perfectly I momentarily doubted my own sanity. My prized possessions began showing up damaged. The pearl necklace my grandmother gave me was found with several beads missing. My sheet music appeared with coffee stains or torn pages. Each time, Audrey was conveniently the one to discover the damage, expressing exaggerated concern. "Blaine, are you okay? Why would you do this to your own things?" Social media became a battlefield I did not even know I was fighting on. Friends grew distant, canceling plans with vague excuses. It was only months later that I discovered Audrey had created a secondary Instagram account impersonating me, where I sent inappropriate messages to my friends' boyfriends, complained about my friends behind their backs, and posted increasingly erratic status updates about feeling misunderstood and persecuted. The most devastating discovery came when I found a folder hidden in Audrey's closet, containing copies of every college application I had submitted. Next to each was a corresponding letter or email she had sent to the admissions departments, posing as me to withdraw my applications or decline my acceptances. She had systematically closed every door to my future, one by one. There were also printouts of emails between me and James, containing disturbing messages and accusations I had never written. When I confronted my parents with this evidence, the reaction was worse than I could have imagined. They had already been primed by weeks of Audrey's manipulations to see me as unstable. Rather than examining the documents carefully, they focused on the fact that I had invaded Audrey's privacy by searching her room. My father accused me of creating the documents myself as part of an elaborate delusion. "This has gone far enough," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We have tried to be patient, but this obsession with blaming your sister for your own choices and mistakes needs to stop." The orchestrated fall reached its climax one terrible night in late August. I returned home from a solitary walk to find my parents and Audrey sitting in the living room with expressions of grave concern. On the coffee table lay my laptop, open to emails I had never seen, documenting conversations with a fictional boyfriend plotting something dangerous. There were searches for how to make someone sorry they ever hurt you, and other threatening phrases I had never typed. "Audrey found these when she borrowed your laptop to print her college forms," my mother said, her voice trembling. "Blaine, we are worried about you." "Really worried?" "I never wrote any of that," I protested, though I already knew it was useless. "Audrey is setting me up. She wrote those emails herself. She did the searches. Can you not see what is happening here?" Audrey began to cry, her shoulders shaking with what looked like genuine fear. "I see. This is what I was afraid of. She always blames me. I did not want to show you these, but I was scared. She has been saying such terrible things about all of us." My father put his arm around Audrey protectively. "We found the journal too, Blaine. The one where you wrote about making Audrey pay." My blood ran cold. "What journal?" "I do not have a journal like that." My mother pulled out a black notebook I had never seen before. Inside, in handwriting eerily similar to mine but slightly off, were pages of disturbing thoughts and plans directed at Audrey and my parents. It was a masterful forgery, close enough to my handwriting to convince my parents, who were already predisposed to believe the worst. "We love you," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "But we need to get you help." "Professional help." "We have spoken with Dr. Winters," my father added, referring to our family physician. "She recommended a facility that specializes in cases like yours. Young adults experiencing psychological breaks. They can help you, Blaine." The word facility echoed in my head like a death knell. They wanted to institutionalize me. Based on evidence manufactured by my sister, they were ready to lock me away. In that moment, looking at my family's faces, I realized a devastating truth. They believed Audrey. Completely. My word meant nothing against the elaborate web of lies she had constructed. "Can I at least think about it overnight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My parents exchanged worried glances. "Of course," my mother finally said. "We have an appointment to tour the facility tomorrow at 10. We can discuss everything then." That night, as my family slept, I made the most difficult decision of my life. I could not prove my innocence against Audrey's manipulations. I could not risk being committed to a psychiatric facility based on fabricated evidence. With shaking hands, I packed a backpack with essential clothes, the remaining cash I had hidden in a hollowed-out book, my identification documents, and the damaged pearl necklace from my grandmother. I left behind everything else. Photos, mementos, the life I had built for 18 years. As I crept down the stairs in the pre-dawn darkness, I heard a noise and turned to see Audrey watching me from the top of the staircase. There was no pretense now, no fake tears or concerned expression. She smiled, a cold, triumphant smile that confirmed every suspicion I had. "No one will believe you ever came back," she said softly. "I will make sure of it." I did not respond. There was nothing left to say. I walked out the front door of my childhood home, knowing I could never return. 3 hours later, I boarded a bus to Chicago, a city far enough away that my family would not think to look for me there. As the bus pulled away from the station, I watched my old life disappear in the rearview mirror. I was now officially a ghost, erased from my own family narrative, replaced by the story Audrey had created about me. At 18, with no support system and a broken heart, I began my life in the shadows. What I did not realize then was that Audrey's victory was just the beginning. In my absence, she would not only take my place in the family, but attempt to take over the very life I had been forced to abandon. The first 6 months in Chicago were a lesson in pure survival. I arrived with $870 to my name, a backpack of clothes, and the crushing weight of abandonment. My first apartment was a dingy studio above a 24-hour laundromat in a neighborhood where police sirens provided nightly lullabies. I found work as a waitress at a 24-hour diner where the manager paid in cash and didn't ask questions about my limited work history or why a girl who spoke like she came from money was serving plates of greasy eggs at 3 in the morning. I changed my last name to my grandmother's maiden name, Wilson, partly out of fear that my parents might try to find me to force me into treatment, and partly because I could no longer bear the connection to the family that had chosen to believe the worst about me. I became Blaine Wilson, a girl with no past and an uncertain future. The loneliness was suffocating. I had gone from having a supportive boyfriend, friends I had known since childhood, and the structure of a family, however flawed, to absolute solitude. On my 19th birthday, I sat alone on my bare mattress eating a cupcake I had bought myself, trying not to remember the elaborate parties my mother had always insisted on throwing. I cried myself to sleep that night, wondering if anyone even remembered it was my birthday, if anyone missed the real me. My only lifeline was my grandmother. I tried calling her 3 times over those first months, but each time, either my mother or father answered her phone. I would hang up immediately, heart racing, afraid they would somehow trace the call. On my 4th attempt, I finally reached her, only to have a conversation that broke my heart all over again. "Grandma, it's Blaine," I said when she answered. There was a long pause. "A Blaine? Oh my goodness. Where are you? Everyone has been so worried." "No, they haven't," I said, my voice breaking. "Did they tell you what happened? What Audrey did?" Another pause, longer this time. "Darling, I think you need to come home. Your parents told me everything. About the concerning behavior, the jealousy toward your sister. There are people who can help you." My blood ran cold. Even my grandmother, my greatest ally, believed their version of events. "They're lying," I whispered. "Audrey manipulated everything. She sabotaged my scholarship, my relationship, everything." "Oh, Blaine," she sighed, her voice heavy with what sounded like pity. "Audrey is doing so well at Princeton. She doesn't have time for these elaborate schemes you've invented. Please let your parents know where you are. They just want to help you get better." I hung up, numb with the realization that Audrey's manipulation extended beyond my immediate family. She had poisoned even the relationship I thought was unbreakable. That was my last attempt to contact anyone from my previous life for nearly 3 years. It was during this time that I discovered, through careful monitoring of social media, the extent to which Audrey had taken over what should have been my life. She had not only turned my family against me, but had stepped directly into the void I left behind. Photos showed her attending Princeton, the school she had always wanted to go to, while telling everyone it was her second choice after her first choice fell through. She joined the same clubs I had been interested in, took up piano with sudden, natural talent, and even began dating James, my ex-boyfriend, less than 6 months after I disappeared. The narrative she created about me was devastating. According to mutual friends who occasionally posted about me, I had experienced a mental health crisis due to the pressure of being a prodigy. In Audrey's version, lovingly shared with concerned relatives and friends, I had become jealous of her achievements, developed delusions that she was out to get me, and run away after my parents suggested I seek treatment. She positioned herself as the concerned, heartbroken sister, posting tearful pleas for me to come home and get the help you need on holidays and my birthdays, garnering sympathy and admiration for her compassion. Meanwhile, I slowly rebuilt my life from nothing. After a year of waitressing double shifts, I had saved enough to enroll in community college part-time. I could not pursue piano performance as I had planned, the memories still too painful, but I discovered a talent for teaching when I began giving basic piano lessons to the restaurant manager's daughter in exchange for extra shifts. Music education became my new path, a way to stay connected to my passion while building a sustainable future. By the time I turned 23, I had completed an associate's degree and transferred to a 4-year university to finish a bachelor's in music education. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through school: waitressing, teaching piano at a local music store, and playing background music at an upscale hotel bar on weekends. Sleep was a luxury I rarely enjoyed, but the exhaustion kept the darker thoughts at bay. I made friends gradually, cautious people who accepted my vague explanations about a complicated family situation, without pressing for details. Maria, a fellow music student, became my closest confidant, though even she knew only fragments of my story. Rick, the bartender at the hotel where I played piano, became a trusted friend who looked out for me during late nights. Katie, my roommate for 2 years, brought me out of my shell with her relentless optimism. They became my chosen family, filling some of the void left by those who had abandoned me. 4 years into my new life, I received news that shattered me all over again. My grandmother had passed away. I saw the obituary online, posted by a distant cousin on Facebook. The funeral had already happened. I hadn't been notified, hadn't been given the chance to say goodbye to the woman who had first placed my fingers on piano keys and set my life on its course. The grief was overwhelming, made worse by the photos posted from the service. Audrey was there, of course, looking appropriately devastated, wearing a pearl necklace that looked suspiciously like the one my grandmother had given me, the one I had taken with me when I fled. That loss marked a turning point. I had been surviving, but not truly living. I realized I had allowed Audrey to steal not only my past, but my present as well. I was existing in the shadows, afraid to build anything permanent, afraid to trust, afraid to love. The person I had become, Blaine Wilson, felt like a temporary identity, a placeholder until I could reclaim my true self. By my 27th birthday, I had completed a master's degree in music education and secured a stable position teaching at a respected arts high school. I had my own apartment, small but filled with second-hand furniture I had lovingly restored. I had friends who cared about me, students who looked up to me, and colleagues who respected my work. From the outside, I appeared whole healed. But inside, there remained a void where my family should have been. Not the family that had rejected me, but the idea of family, the connection to a shared history, the unconditional love that should have protected me from harm rather than inflicting it. I dated occasionally, but pulled away whenever relationships became serious. How could I truly connect with someone when half my life was a secret I couldn't share? 3 years after my grandmother's death, when I had nearly resigned myself to never having closure, an unexpected email arrived that would change everything. The subject line read simply, "Regarding the estate of Evelyn Montgomery." My grandmother's lawyer had been searching for me for years, following instructions left in her will. Against all odds, he had found me through the name change records and my teaching license. What he had to share would finally give me the validation I had been denied for so long, and the means to reclaim the truth that had been stolen from me. The email from Evelyn Montgomery's attorney, Harold Kensington, was brief and professional. It requested a meeting regarding substantial matters pertaining to your grandmother's estate and provided his office address in Hartford, Connecticut. I stared at the screen for nearly an hour, torn between caution and desperate curiosity. What if this was somehow another of Audrey's manipulations? But how could she have found me after all these years? Eventually, practicality won out. I could not afford to fly to Connecticut on a teacher's salary for what might be nothing, so I requested a video conference instead. 2 days later, I sat at my kitchen table, heart pounding as the distinguished elderly face of Harold Kensington appeared on my laptop screen. He adjusted his glasses and peered at me with gentle blue eyes. "Ms. Wilson, or should I say Ms. Warren? I must say, you look remarkably like your grandmother in her youth." The unexpected comparison brought tears to my eyes. "Wilson is fine," I managed. "It's been my legal name for 11 years now." He nodded, understanding without judgment. "Ms. Wilson, then. I apologize for the delay in reaching you. Your grandmother left explicit instructions that I find you, regardless of how long it took or what resources were required. She was quite insistent that certain information and assets be delivered directly to you and no one else." "What kind of information?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Perhaps it's best if I show you." He held up a sealed envelope. "This letter was entrusted to me with instructions that I personally verify your identity before delivering it. Now that I've seen you, I'm satisfied you are indeed Blaine Warren, Evelyn Montgomery's granddaughter. I'll send this via secured courier today. But first, there's something else you should know." He explained that my grandmother had left me a significant inheritance, separate from the family assets distributed to my parents and Audrey. This separate trust had been established in secret during the last years of her life, with stipulations that it remain undisclosed to anyone but me. "The trust contains approximately $1.2 million, he said, as casually as if discussing the weather, plus ownership of her lake house property in Vermont and her personal collection of musical instruments, including the Steinway grand piano." I couldn't speak. The amount was staggering, life-changing. But more than the money, the fact that my grandmother had created this trust secretly, specifically for me, suggested she might have known more than she let on during our last painful phone conversation. The letter arrived 3 days later. With trembling hands, I broke the seal and unfolded several pages covered in my grandmother's elegant handwriting. "My dearest Blaine," it began. "If you're reading this, I am gone, and you have been found at last. I owe you the most profound apology, one that cannot possibly make up for the years of injustice you have suffered." I sank to the floor, clutching the pages as I read her confession. After our last phone call, she had begun to have doubts about the family's version of events. While initially believing what my parents and Audrey told her, certain inconsistencies troubled her. Why had I abandoned my beloved piano if I had simply experienced a breakdown? Why would I cut off contact with her, the person I had been closest to? Why had no one been able to provide concrete evidence of my supposed mental decline besides Audrey? 3 years before her death, she had hired a private investigator without my parents' knowledge. What he uncovered confirmed her worst fears. He found evidence that Audrey had indeed impersonated me in emails to Juilliard, withdrawing my acceptance. He discovered the fake social media accounts Audrey had created to damage my reputation. Most damning of all, he found drafts of the forged journal on Audrey's old laptop, which she had left behind when upgrading to a new one. "I confronted your parents with this evidence," my grandmother wrote. To my heartbreak, they refused to acknowledge it. They had invested so completely in believing Audrey's version of events that accepting the truth would mean confronting their own devastating failure as parents. They chose denial over justice for you. I cannot forgive them for this, nor can I forgive myself for not seeing through the deception sooner. She went on to explain that she had secretly begun liquidating assets and establishing the trust for me, determined that I would eventually have the resources to rebuild my life when found. She had also collected and preserved all the evidence the investigator had gathered. "The truth must come to light, my darling girl," her letter concluded. "Not for vengeance, but for healing. You deserve to reclaim your story. Use these resources as you see fit, whether to confront the past or to build a new future far from those who betrayed you. Know that I believed in you, even when I failed to show it. My greatest regret is that I cannot tell you this in person. All my love always, Grandma. Included with the letter was a USB drive containing the investigator's full report, including photographs, email records, and even recorded conversations with former classmates who admitted Audrey had manipulated them into turning against me. It was comprehensive, irrefutable proof that everything I had experienced was real, not a delusion. The validation was overwhelming. For 11 years, I had carried the weight of not being believed, of having my reality denied. Now, from beyond the grave, my grandmother had given me the greatest gift possible. Confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that my memories were accurate, that the injustice done to me was real. With this new financial security, I took a leave of absence from teaching and hired my own investigator to pick up where my grandmother's had left off. For 3 months, he gathered additional evidence about Audrey's life since I had disappeared. The picture that emerged was disturbing in its calculation. Audrey had graduated from Princeton and gone on to law school, building a successful career as a corporate attorney at one of the top firms in Boston. She maintained the fiction that I had experienced a breakdown and disappeared, occasionally expressing concern about my whereabouts to maintain her caring sister image. She had continued her relationship with James, and according to the investigator's findings, they were now engaged to be married. The wedding was scheduled for June, just 3 months away. With this information, I faced the most difficult decision of my life. Should I use this evidence to finally expose the truth? Or should I continue my separate life, using my inheritance to build something beautiful far away from the pain of the past? For weeks, I agonized over the choice. Confrontation meant reopening wounds that had taken years to heal. It meant facing people who had rejected and replaced me. It meant risking being painted as the bitter, mentally unstable sister once again. But staying silent meant allowing Audrey to continue her life built on lies. It meant my parents never confronting their failure. It meant James marrying someone who had systematically destroyed his relationship with me through manipulation and deceit. The deciding factor came when my investigator uncovered recent emails between Audrey and James. In them, James expressed occasional doubts about my supposed breakdown, mentioning that certain things never added up. Audrey's response was chilling in its calculation, gaslighting him just as she had gaslighted my entire family about me. This revelation clarified everything. This wasn't just about me anymore. Audrey was still actively manipulating people I had once cared about. Her patterns hadn't changed. She had simply gotten better at hiding them. On a crisp April morning, I made my decision. I would attend Audrey's wedding. I would bring the evidence. I would speak my truth, not for revenge, but to free everyone from the web of lies they had been living in for over a decade. James deserved to know who he was really marrying. My parents deserved one chance to face the truth of what they had allowed to happen. The wedding was scheduled for June 15th at the Hartford Grand Hotel, an elegant venue where my parents had often attended charity functions. According to the information my investigator had gathered, it would be a lavish affair with over 300 guests, a testament to Audrey's social climbing and my parents' continued focus on appearances. I booked a flight to Connecticut for June 14th. I reserved a room at the same hotel where the wedding would take place. I prepared a folder containing key evidence that could not be denied or explained away. And I bought a simple but elegant blue dress, the color I had always loved but Audrey had always avoided wearing because it wasn't her color. The night before my flight, I sat in my apartment surrounded by the life I had built from nothing. If things went as planned, by this time tomorrow, everything would change. The identity I had carefully constructed, the boundaries I had established, the peace I had fought for, all would be altered by confronting the past I had fled. Was I ready? No. I would never be ready for this. But I was stronger now. I was no longer the frightened 18-year-old, who had boarded a bus to nowhere with nothing but a backpack and broken dreams. I was Blaine Wilson, a woman who had survived abandonment and betrayal, who had built a life on her own terms. And I was finally ready to reclaim the truth that had been stolen from me. As I packed the last items in my suitcase, I carefully placed my grandmother's pearl necklace in a velvet pouch. It would be my talisman, my reminder of the one person who had ultimately believed in me, even from beyond the grave. Tomorrow, I would return to Connecticut not as a ghost seeking revenge, but as a woman demanding nothing more than the truth. The morning of Audrey's wedding dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself approved of the union about to take place. I stood by my hotel window, watching early preparations in the hotel gardens where the ceremony would be held. White chairs in perfect rows, an elaborate floral arch, musicians setting up string instruments near a small raised platform. Everything picture perfect, just as my sister had always wanted. I spent hours preparing myself, not out of vanity, but as armor for the battle ahead. I styled my hair differently than I had worn it in my youth, swept up in an elegant twist that showcased the mature angles of my face. My makeup was subtle but enhancing, designed to project confidence rather than to hide or disguise. The blue dress fit perfectly, its simple lines and quality fabric speaking of taste rather than flash. Around my neck, I fastened my grandmother's pearl necklace, identical to the one I had seen Audrey wearing in photos, except this was the original. I wondered if she would recognize it. At 3:30, 30 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I made my way down to the lobby and then out to the garden area. I had strategically selected a seat in the last row on the bride's side, partially obscured by a decorative pillar but with a clear view of the altar. As guests filtered in, I kept my head down, scrolling through my phone as if checking messages. The last thing I wanted was to be recognized before the moment I had planned. Familiar faces passed by, older now but still recognizable. My mother's college friends, my father's business associates, cousins and distant relatives who had attended my high school graduation 11 years earlier. None spared me a second glance. To them, I was just another guest, perhaps from the groom's side, a face they didn't need to place. At 10 minutes to 4, my parents made their entrance. My breath caught in my throat. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and he moved with a slight stiffness that hadn't been there before. My mother was still beautiful, her chestnut hair now highlighted with expert lowlights to disguise the gray, her figure still slim in her expensive mother of the bride dress. They looked happy, proud, completely untroubled by the absence of their firstborn daughter on this momentous family occasion. The garden filled quickly. James's parents arrived, his mother wiping away anticipatory tears already. Then came James's groomsmen, handsome in classic black tuxedos. Finally, James himself appeared at the altar alongside the officiant. My heart gave a painful twist. He had grown more handsome with age, his boyish features maturing into a man's strong jawline and confident posture. Yet there was something in his eyes, a shadow of uncertainty perhaps, that gave me hope he wasn't entirely convinced of his path. The music changed, signaling the start of the ceremony. Bridesmaids processed down the aisle in blush pink gowns, each carrying small bouquets of white roses and baby's breath. The guests rose as the bridal march began. And then there she was. Audrey was stunning in a designer gown with an elaborate lace bodice and a skirt that seemed to float around her as she walked. Her chestnut hair, so like mine, was arranged in soft curls under a cathedral-length veil. Around her neck gleamed a pearl necklace that was clearly meant to be our grandmother's, though I knew it was a replica. She practically glowed with triumph as she processed down the aisle on our father's arm, the picture of the perfect bride about to begin her perfect life. I remained standing with the other guests, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain those nearby must hear it. As Audrey reached the altar, and the officiant asked everyone to be seated, I felt a momentary wave of doubt. Was I really going to do this? Destroy what appeared to be a joyous occasion? Cause a scene in front of hundreds of people? The weight of the evidence folder in my small clutch purse reminded me why I was here. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about truth. The ceremony proceeded with traditional elegance. The officiant spoke about love and commitment, about the journey Audrey and James had taken to reach this day. I nearly laughed aloud at the irony when he mentioned how they had overcome obstacles to be together, knowing that I had been the main obstacle, systematically removed through deception and manipulation. After the exchange of vows, the officiant said the words I had been waiting for. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. In movies, this is always followed by dramatic silence. In real life, it was no different. The moment stretched, guests glancing around with small smiles, secure in the knowledge that no one would actually object. It was merely a formality, a tradition with no practical purpose in the modern world. I stood up. The movement immediately drew every eye in the vicinity. A ripple of confusion spread through the assembled guests as I stepped into the aisle. I began walking forward, my steps measured and deliberate. The officiant looked confused, clearly not expecting an actual objection. Audrey, whose back had been to me, turned slightly, curiosity mixing with irritation on her face. And then she saw me. The transformation was immediate and shocking. All color drained from her face. Her perfect bridal makeup couldn't hide the sudden pallor that made her look like she'd seen a ghost. In a way, she had. I continued walking until I stood about 15 feet from the altar, close enough to be clearly seen by everyone, but not so close as to appear physically threatening. A murmur had begun among the guests. Confusion. Questions. Who is that woman? What's happening? I apologize for the interruption, I said, my voice clear and steady, projecting to reach even the back rows. My name is Blaine Warren. Or it was 11 years ago, when I was erased from this family. The reaction was electric. Gasps. My mother's hand flying to her mouth. My father half rising from his seat, then sinking back down as if his legs wouldn't support him. James staring at me with shocked recognition, then looking between me and Audrey with dawning horror. Blaine, he whispered, loud enough to be heard in the sudden silence. Audrey had recovered somewhat, her expression hardening into something between fear and rage. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice high and brittle. My sister had a breakdown years ago. This person is clearly an imposter trying to ruin my wedding. Someone call security. I opened my clutch and removed the folder. I'm not here for revenge, I said, addressing the entire assembly but looking directly at Audrey. I'm here because the truth deserves to be spoken. 11 years ago, my sister systematically destroyed my life. She intercepted my correspondence with Juilliard, canceling my scholarship without my knowledge. She turned my friends against me through fake emails and social media accounts. She convinced our parents I was mentally unstable when I tried to expose what she had done. My mother stood up, visibly shaking. This is preposterous. How dare you crash our daughter's wedding with these insane accusations? I turned to her, keeping my voice level. Mom, I have proof. Incontrovertible evidence gathered by professional investigators, including one hired by Grandma Evelyn before she died. That caught her attention. My father's too. They exchanged a quick, troubled glance. Grandma knew, I continued. In her final years, she discovered what really happened. She left me a letter explaining everything, along with the evidence her investigator uncovered. I held up the folder. It's all here. Copies of the emails Audrey sent pretending to be me. Screenshots of the fake social media accounts she created. Evidence of how she manipulated everyone in my life, including James. I turned to him then, seeing the confusion and pain in his eyes. She contacted you pretending to be me, didn't she? Said things that made you doubt our relationship. Made me sound unstable and jealous. And then she was there to comfort you when you broke up with me, wasn't she? James's expression told me I was right. He looked at Audrey, who was now visibly panicking. She's lying, Audrey shrieked, her perfect bridal composure completely shattered. She's always been jealous of me. She couldn't stand that I got into Princeton while she was rejected from Juilliard. I wasn't rejected, I said quietly. You forged emails withdrawing my acceptance after I received a full scholarship. I have the proof right here, including testimony from the Juilliard admissions office confirming the withdrawal came from my email account, which you had accessed. The crowd was completely silent now, hundreds of guests frozen in shock at the drama unfolding before them. My father finally stood and approached me cautiously. Blaine, is it really you? He asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. I nodded. It's me, Dad. I've spent 11 years building a new life after you were willing to institutionalize me based on evidence Audrey fabricated. I would have stayed away forever if not for Grandma's letter. What letter? My mother demanded, joining my father. Mother never mentioned any letter to us. Because she didn't trust you anymore, I said simply. Not after you refused to consider the evidence her investigator found. She left instructions with her lawyer to find me, no matter how long it took. I opened the folder and handed them the first document, a copy of my grandmother's letter. As they read it, their faces went through a progression of emotions. Disbelief, confusion, dawning horror, and finally, devastating realization. Audrey, seeing she was losing control of the situation, made one last desperate attempt. This is all an elaborate fake, she cried, turning to James and clutching his arm. Baby, you know me. You know I would never do these things. She's trying to destroy our special day because she's sick and obsessed with a relationship that ended over a decade ago. But James was looking at the pearl necklace around my neck, identical to the one Audrey wore. Your grandmother's necklace, he said slowly. Audrey told me she inherited it after your grandmother died. But you're wearing the same necklace. Because this is the original, I said, touching the pearls gently. Grandma gave it to me before I left for college. I took it with me the night I ran away. Audrey is wearing a replica. That small detail, so specific and verifiable, seemed to crystallize the truth for James. He took a step back from Audrey, then another. All those times things didn't add up, he said, more to himself than to her. The inconsistencies in your stories about Blaine. How you always changed the subject when I asked detailed questions about what happened. How you had access to all her social media accounts to monitor her in case she ever reached out. He looked up at Audrey, really seeing her perhaps for the first time. It was all a lie, wasn't it? Audrey's face contorted with rage. She's turning you against me too. Just like she's trying to turn my parents against me. After everything I've done for this family. What exactly have you done, Audrey? My father asked quietly, looking up from my grandmother's letter with eyes that suddenly seemed decades older. Besides lie to us for 11 years about our own daughter. The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Audrey looked around wildly, seeing nothing but shocked and increasingly suspicious faces. Her perfect day, her perfect life built on elaborate deception, was crumbling before her eyes. With a strangled cry, she grabbed her elaborate skirts and ran back down the aisle, pushing past stunned guests in her desperation to escape the truth that had finally caught up with her. The white of her gown disappeared through the garden doors into the hotel, leaving behind a vacuum of shocked silence. I hadn't come for revenge, but standing there in the aftermath of Audrey's flight, watching the realization dawn on hundreds of faces, I felt something shift inside me. The burden I had carried for 11 years, the weight of not being believed, was finally lifting. The truth had been spoken. What happened next would be up to each person present to reconcile with their own conscience. James approached me slowly, his eyes never leaving my face. Blaine, he said, his voice breaking on my name. I am so sorry. I had no idea. I never would have. I raised a hand to stop him. We'll talk later. This isn't the moment. I turned to my parents, who stood frozen in horrified realization. You too. I'm staying in room 312. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about everything that happened, you know where to find me. With that, I turned and walked back down the aisle, past the rows of shocked guests, my head held high. I hadn't planned what would happen after this moment. I had only known I needed to speak my truth. Now that I had, I felt neither triumph nor satisfaction, just a profound exhaustion and the first tentative stirrings of peace. As I reached the garden doors, I heard the murmur of conversation resuming behind me, hundreds of voices trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. The perfect wedding had been derailed by the truth, and nothing would ever be the same for my family again. Whether that would lead to healing or further destruction remained to be seen. But for the first time in 11 years, the choice was no longer solely in Audrey's hands. The truth had finally been given a voice, and there would be no returning to the comfortable lies that had sustained them for so long. The aftermath of the wedding that never was unfolded, in ways I couldn't have predicted. I returned to my hotel room and sat in silence, emotionally drained yet oddly calm. I had done what I came to do. I had spoken my truth. The rest was beyond my control. The first knock on my door came 2 hours later. I opened it to find James standing there, still in his wedding tuxedo, though he had removed the tie and jacket. His face bore the stunned look of someone whose entire reality had been upended in an instant. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. When I nodded and stepped aside, he entered and stood awkwardly in the center of the room, as if unsure whether he had the right to sit down. "I spoke with your parents," he began. "They showed me the evidence. The emails. The journal pages Audrey forged. The investigator's report." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache for the boy I had once loved. "God, Blaine, I cannot believe I was so completely fooled. All these years." "She was very convincing," I said, offering the small mercy of understanding. "She fooled everyone, not just you." He shook his head. "But I should have known. There were signs, inconsistencies in her stories. Times when she would get defensive if I asked too many questions about what happened to you. I guess I wanted to believe the simpler explanation. That you had some kind of breakdown and disappeared. The alternative was too horrible to contemplate. That we're all capable of being deceived by those we trust," I finished for him. "Yes," he finally sat down heavily in the desk chair. "She is gone, by the way. Packed a bag and left before your parents could confront her. No one knows where she went." I wasn't surprised. Audrey had always been a master of escape when consequences loomed. And the guests. Most have left. Your parents made a brief announcement about a family emergency. The rumors are flying, of course. He looked up at me, his eyes searching my face. "You look so different. But also the same somehow." 11 years will do that," I replied. We fell into silence, the weight of all that had been lost hanging between us. "I do not expect anything from you, James," I said finally. What happened today was not about trying to reclaim the past. It was about establishing the truth. He nodded slowly. "I know. But I cannot help wondering what might have been if I had trusted you back then. If I had not let her manipulate me into believing you were unstable and jealous." "We cannot live in what might have been," I said gently. "We can only move forward from here." The next knock came as James was leaving. My parents stood in the hallway, looking small and broken in a way I had never seen before. My mother's makeup was streaked with tears. My father's shoulders, always so proudly squared, now drooped with the weight of unbearable guilt. They entered hesitantly, as if expecting me to turn them away. We sat facing each other, 3 people connected by blood but separated by years of deception and absence. "We do not know where to begin," my father said, his voice hoarse. "What Audrey did. What we allowed to happen. There are no words adequate to express our regret." "You believed her over me," I said simply. It was not an accusation, merely a statement of fact. "Yes," my mother's voice broke on the single syllable. "We failed you in the most fundamental way possible. We let ourselves be deceived because it was easier than facing the truth. That our younger daughter was capable of such calculating cruelty, and that we had somehow raised her to become that person. When your grandmother came to us with her suspicions, we dismissed them," my father continued. "We had invested so completely in Audrey's version of events that accepting the truth would have meant confronting our own catastrophic failure as parents." "To both of you." I studied their faces, searching for the right response. Part of me wanted to rage at them, to make them feel every ounce of the pain and abandonment I had suffered. Another part yearned to fall into their arms and be their daughter again, to reclaim the family I had lost. In the end, I chose honesty. I cannot simply forgive and forget, I told them. What happened changed the entire course of my life. I had to rebuild from nothing, without the support or love of my family. That is not something that can be erased with an apology, no matter how sincere. They nodded, accepting this hard truth without argument. But, I continued, I am willing to begin a new relationship slowly, based on truth and respect. Not picking up where we left off, because those people do not exist anymore. But moving forward as the people we are now. That is more than we deserve, my mother whispered. It is not about deserving, I replied. It is about choosing to build something healthy from the ashes of what was destroyed. Over the following months, this became our path. Slow, careful steps toward a new kind of family relationship. My parents sought therapy, both individually and as a couple, to process their guilt and understand how they had been so thoroughly manipulated. I maintained firm boundaries, engaging only when I felt emotionally equipped to do so. Audrey remained absent. According to my parents, she had emptied her bank accounts and disappeared. Part of me was relieved not to face the complexity of confronting her directly. Another part recognized that without addressing the root of what had happened, true healing would remain elusive for all of us. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, I received a letter forwarded through my parents. Audrey's handwriting on the envelope made my heart race. Inside was not the apology I might have hoped for, nor the angry denunciations I had feared, but something more complicated. A rambling explanation of her lifelong feelings of inadequacy, her conviction that I had been given everything while she received the leftovers of our parents' attention and pride. It was not a justification for her actions, she wrote, but perhaps a partial explanation. She was seeking help, she claimed, trying to understand what had driven her to such extremes. I did not respond. Perhaps someday I would be ready for that conversation, but not yet. Her letter went into a drawer, neither rejected nor accepted, simply acknowledged as part of the complex tapestry of our shared and separate histories. Meanwhile, I rebuilt other relationships. Several extended family members reached out independently, offering apologies and hoping to reconnect. I accepted some, declined others, always guided by what felt authentic and healthy rather than what was expected. James and I established a cautious friendship. The romantic connection of our youth was gone, replaced by something more measured but also more genuine. We met occasionally for coffee, carefully navigating the strange reality of having once been deeply in love, then complete strangers, and now something undefined in between. Most significantly, I returned to music. With part of my grandmother's inheritance, I established a small music school focused on providing quality education to underprivileged students. The first time I sat at a grand piano similar to my grandmother's Steinway and played a complete concerto, I wept with the bittersweet joy of reclaiming something I had thought lost forever. 2 years after the wedding confrontation, I met Michael at a charity event for the Arts Foundation that supported my school. He was a composer who approached music with the same passion I did. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and honest communication. When I finally shared my full story with him, his response was simple. "Thank you for trusting me with your truth." There was no judgment, no disbelief, just acceptance of my experiences as part of who I had become. The most profound lesson I learned through all of this was that truth, however painful, is ultimately the only foundation on which genuine connection can be built. The years I spent living in the shadows, separated from my own history and identity, taught me the devastating cost of deception, both to those who are deceived and, ultimately, to the deceiver as well. Audrey had stolen my place, my voice, and turned my family against me. For 11 years, I lived as someone else, hiding from the pain of betrayal. But in reclaiming my truth, in refusing to remain silent, I found not revenge but liberation. The moment I stood in that garden and spoke my reality aloud was the moment I truly began to heal. Identity cannot actually be stolen if you hold firm to your own truth. Voice cannot truly be silenced if you find the courage to speak, even when no one seems to be listening. Family can be lost and found, broken and remade, but only when built on the solid ground of authenticity. My journey from betrayal to healing was not a straight line. It did not follow a neat pattern of loss and restoration. It was messy, painful, and remains unfinished. But standing now in the life I have created, surrounded by people who know and accept the whole truth of who I am, I can say with certainty that speaking truth, however difficult, is always the first step toward genuine healing. What about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between comfortable silence and painful truth? Or found yourself rebuilding after betrayal? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their truth deserves to be spoken. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, no matter how long you have lived in the shadows, it is never too late to step into the light of your own authentic story.